You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to today's episode of Locked On Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And thank you for making Locked On Canucks your first listen of the day. My name is Nick Bondi. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick Bondi. I've had bylines before at Daily Hive, Next Misconduct. You can follow Lachlan Irvin at Lock in the Crease. He also has another podcast called The Crease Cast. You can find his writings on his own blog as well. Lachlan, we finally have meaningful hockey to talk about. We had the game last night. It's nice to finally, from now on, every game is going to mean something. And that's important for, I think, a lot of fans out there.
Yeah, regular season hockey. That's what it's all about. And, I think as far as that game is concerned, the end result might not have been what anybody wanted in Canucks Nation. But I think overall, there were two things I took out of this game that don't just have to do with the Canucks themselves. One, the game was intense and fun and the kind of hockey that makes you want to be immediately ready with the popcorn on your couch. And also the fact that just seeing fans in the building again in Canada, like a full crowd. We're not just talking about like a 50% capacity or the 20.
Since March of last year. It's been a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the Canadians in their cup run only got up to about 20% capacity. And to see, like, even if it was Oilers fans cheering for the opposing team, it's great to see people at games again and see that full crowd and be able to see the players kind of feed off of it as the game goes on.
Yeah. So on this episode, we're going to talk about obviously the game last night against the Edmonton Oilers. The Canucks power play struggles. Is it too early to panic? I don't know, but we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about the Canucks power play. And Francesco Aquilini, the owner of the Vancouver Canucks, spoke on Sportsnet 650 yesterday. He doesn't take many interviews that often, so we figured it was a good time to dissect what he had to say. But let's start with last night's game, a 3-2 loss in the shootout to the Edmonton Oilers. I thought, first of all, just our thoughts on the game. I thought Nils Höglander had a great game. He was a standout kind of forward for me, outside of someone like Elias Pettersson, who had a couple of great moves. That one, kind of deke in the first period, and almost an amazing goal in overtime, right? I thought he had a great game. And also the defensive aspect as well. He had a really nice poke check to kind of break up a pass. But Nils Höglander, for me, was a standout forward in that game. I think he's earned his right to get bumped up in the lineup going forward, right? I think we can all agree on that.
Oh, easily. Höglander was a guy who obviously got a lot of attention during the preseason, particularly because it didn't look like he was playing very well. He looked like he was struggling a lot at times. And you could kind of see in his energy today that he was on a mission. Like there was a clear mindset for him that he wasn't going to necessarily score a goal, but he was going to be a factor in that game. And that was pretty evident. I think he had ended up with 2 assists on the night. I think he had both. I think he had the one on the power play and the Quinn Hughes tying goal. He had a hand in creating as well, not just from making the initial pass, but also putting himself in front of the net on Mike Smith, and Mike Smith not being able to read that shot from Quinn Hughes as well as he probably would have liked to. And overall, the Canucks as a whole might have, I think, struggled at times, particularly during the second period and the late stages of the first. They definitely didn't look like the same team that we saw right at the first 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes and in overtime as well. Nils Höglander definitely was one guy who showed up and played the full 60. The other guy that I would throw in there as well is Thatcher Demko, who looked absolutely spectacular. The Canucks don't even sniff an overtime loss if it's not for Thatcher Demko. He completely kept them in that game, particularly at points when Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl were looking at their most dangerous. He had a couple huge stops on Zach Hyman at points, like a couple different breakaway stops. He was phenomenal, completely dialed in. That's the goaltending that wins you games and gets you into the playoffs.
And the type of goaltending the Vancouver Canucks are going to need throughout the season, right? We've talked about it on this podcast before, previewing the season. Thatcher Demko's got to be one of the better goalies in the league if the Vancouver Canucks want to make the playoffs and have a successful season, because they're going to give up shots. And I think another thing we can take from this game is Alex Chason. I'm done with Alex Chason on the power play. I think I'm already done with him. I saw the memes on Reddit of like Alex Chason memes from Oilers fans and Canucks fans. Like finally they can unite and Alex Chason sucking on the power play. I'm just done with Alex Chason. It's been one game. I'm already done with him.
The experiment is already over for you.
We have a guy healthy scratch last night who is Italian and can, play on the power play and do well. His name is Nick Patan. If Travis Green, if you're listening to this, get Nick Patan, play him in the Sam Gagner role. You don't have to play him much at 5-on-5, but get him on that second power play unit.
Why do I feel like at this point next month, I will just end up being replaced by Nick Patan? Like it'll just be a show hosted by you and Nick Patan. The Nick and Nick show. That's how it's gonna go.
Squared.
Yeah, the Nick Squared podcast. There you go. I think Chason for sure. Chason had a terrible game. Like I don't think there's any stress. I don't know. I'll say this. I don't think I'm ready to pull the plug on him as just in the lineup in general based on one game, but it's not hard to see why people are at that point already because the chase on the first goal of the game. This is honestly like something that I think a lot of people, like including myself, are really still working on when it comes to reading the play and being able to see the full play for what it is. I see that first goal and I think, oh, Tyler Myers doesn't have his man. He's just standing there.
That's a natural reaction because we've seen it a bunch before. But I think I know what you're going to say here is it wasn't just on Tyler Myers. It's just a collapse by the entire team on that defensive play.
Right, and that starts because Chason does not pick up his assignment, which is Darnell Nurse. He does not get. He ends up kind of drifting into no man's land, not covering Nurse. That means that essentially JT Miller has to go up and cover for him, or Pettersson. Pettersson's covering low on defense. Hughes kind of has to track around and find his way back to the front of the net. JT Miller loses his stick, which is a tough one. He
had a rough game as well.
He had a rough game as well.
He had a rough game, a few missed passes, a few times where he had the opportunity to control the puck at the blue line, especially on the power play, and just didn't work. It was one of those, classic JT Miller games we saw last year where he's frustrated, letting off F-bombs. You couldn't hear him obviously as much because there was a crowd this time, but it was still one of those classic, frustrated JT Miller games.
Yeah. And Miller had a definitive, this is a cliche in hockey, but the gripping the stick too tightly type of game where it looked like he was just trying to force things a couple times and it started working against him very quickly. Like he started bobbling passes that he normally would have, whiffing on shots that he normally would get full connection on. It was just the type of game where it started badly and then it got worse over time. And, that Chason goal the Puljujarvi goal, that Chason started the domino effect on, it was just it was a whole cascade of messes. I feel bad that I blamed exclusively Tyler Myers. He should have had his feet moving, but it was not entirely on him. It was very much a whole group of mistakes. And and with Chason on the power play, there was the one opportunity where he had all the time in the world to get a perfect shot off, and he shoots it right into Mike Smith's chest.
Right in his breadbasket.
That's something that we have seen in Vancouver quite a few times from other players, like where they'll get that opportunity right and close, and instead of either picking a corner or looking for or shooting for the purpose of getting a rebound out into the slot, they just shoot it right into the goaltender for them to swallow up. And you can't have that from a veteran. Like you can't. It's one thing if a rookie's doing it and he's learning. It's another thing when you've been in the league as long as Alex Chason has, and you got to know to get a different kind of, to not panic and take a shot right into the goaltender there. So, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about the power play in a bit here. But right now, I think you got to move. I think you got to maybe look at an opportunity to move someone like Nils Höglander up into that spot and see what he can do.
Yeah, and we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the hit. We're calling it already. It's got a name already, Lachlan.
The hit.
We finally got some vengeance for the Duncan
Took 10
Keith
years.
on Daniel. It's been a decade, but close to a decade, but we finally got it. Tyler Myers just absolutely laying out Duncan Keith in the corner. The hit was so violent. Duncan Keith popped up and he got cut from his visor or from his helmet. Like, that's how violent that hit was. And it was perfectly clean. That was a nice part about it. It wasn't a dirty, cheap shot or anything like that. Just a clean hit from a guy in Tyler Myers who has a big, height and probably weight advantage over Duncan Keith, right? So that was like one of the Tyler Myers has probably lived up to his contract right then and there because of that hit on Duncan Keith. Canucks fans don't forget.
Yeah, that's very true. I personally, I'm not ready to go to that length on when you're talking about the contract. Awesome. I'm sure I'm not going to blame anyone who says otherwise on that. That was I don't believe he did not end. If I remember correctly, he didn't get a penalty on that play for a good reason. He did end up in the box because of the fight with I don't remember which player challenged him after. That is what ended up putting him in they ended up putting him in the box for. I saw some people saying, "Oh, that's a dirty hit," and really, no, it's not.
It wasn't a dirty hit.
It's a gray area, but I think at the end of the day, it was a case of where he's a tall guy hitting a player shorter than him, and it ended up badly in that aspect. In the same way that, if you're Zdeno Chara sometime or Shea Weber, you got to be a little bit more careful when you're hitting people, because of course you're always going to be the towering player in that regard. But it was, there was some definite sure, he's in his late 30s now, definitely not the same player he was in 2012. And but it was still just, it was a pretty good hit, and definitely already probably going to be a defining moment on the highlight reel at the end of the year for the Canucks here.
It was a cathartic moment for a lot of Canucks fans who grew up watching those, late 2010, I guess, late 2000s, that 2011 era team.
Hell,
it was very
Daniel Sedin's watching in the crowd. I'm sure he's probably, I think he's in the press box, or he's at least watching in his office at Rogers Arena now.
Daniel Sedin's buying Tyler Myers a drink next time they go out. Like, thanks, kid. Thank you.
Yeah. We never played together, but I feel like we're friends now. That's where it's
lifelong friends because of that hit. I'm sure Daniel Sedin has a memory of an elephant as well. And loss in the game is the fact that, and loss on all this talk, is the Canucks came back in this game. They're down 2-0, and I can't really blame the Canucks for the two goals. I can blame them for the first one, I guess, but the second goal on the power play by Oilers was just a beautiful tic-tac-toe power play goal. Not much you can do when you talk. We talked about it on the last episode as well, is don't take penalties, and they take, one of the most avoidable, the too many men on the ice penalty, and they get burned for it. But I think at the end of the day, I don't know if it's too early to call it a moral victory, because it's game one of an 82-game season. Yeah. They managed to come back, tie it up, get a point in overtime, in the shootout. Sorry, I thought they were the better team in overtime. So all in all, I guess a somewhat solid result. Like, obviously, when you get to a shootout, you want to win the skills competition. But I think nothing has changed in my opinion, Lachlan, in terms of my outlook for this team after this game, or anything the Canucks have to do better or worse to, I think, succeed, right? I think at the end of the day, this team has not been changed, in their opinion, on my behalf. I think, the defense still needs some work. Don't take penalties. The penalty kill still needs some work, but they have the ability, the offensive power to come back in these games.
Yeah, I think I will say, I think with the power play goal the Oilers got there, I do think that that's a case of that PK just not being very good. I think the PK, I think
that was just a beautiful one-touch pass from Draisaitl. What are you going to do about that?
But you're not going to let that guy there. That Oiler, I forget who scored. I think it was Hyman. Was it?
It was Hyman, like right in front of the net.
Hyman didn't have anybody covering him. Like, he was left just to tap it. He was just left to tap it in. If you're the defense, your job is to make sure that of all people, that guy's got to be pushed out. If you're the goalie, if you're Demko, you're probably yelling at your defense, "Hey, take your man there," because you don't want that. You can't let that pass get across in close. But I will. But I do
playing the
agree
shot
with
from Draisaitl is the problem. You
can, but that's the point, right? You can't all play the shot. You can't all play the shot. So somebody has to. If at least one person has to make sure that net front is cleared, because you got to trust that your goaltender is going to make the save if it's just a straight shot coming at you, because your goalie's first instinct is always going to be that they want the shot as they can see it directly in front of them. They don't want to have to move across to make the save. And I think the Canucks got caught there, but that's something you can work out as the season goes on. I'm not too worried about it. And then I'll say that, yeah, I think the fact that the Canucks already are getting such great goaltending from Demko that they were able to come back in this game. It's kind of the same case I had in our last preseason game we talked about, where it's like, if the Canucks can find the intensity that they had in the last stage of the game and somehow make it apply for the full 60, which is doable. Like, maybe not to that insane amount of urgency, but the idea of playing at that level for the course of a full 60 is not too much to ask, I don't think. If they can find that, they'll have a lot more success in that regard. And I will give Bo Horvat props as well. If there was a skills competition, he won it on his shootout attempt, which was absolutely filthy. I don't think I've ever seen him pull out a dangle quite that nice in a game before, and it was good.
Yeah, and we need to see Niels Höglander in the future on the shootout. No more Tanner Pearson. I think we're done with
Tanner Pearson. I thought Tanner Pearson, or in the shootout. Okay, in the shootout, yes.
Yeah.
But I would actually.
Sorry, I'm just choked that I put, thanks to our friends at BetOnline AG, I put $5 on the Canucks to win exactly 3-2. So losing in the shootout and coming that close kind of really sucked for me. I'm not gonna lie. It would have been a nice payday, but you know what? It was a fellow STM alumni, Kyle Turris, getting the winner. Can't get too upset about that, but I think we mentioned it on the last episode, Lachlan, in the fact that we don't get too upset, don't get too high, don't get too low from this loss. Back in 2019, the Edmonton Oilers beat the Vancouver Canucks pretty handedly, and they had a pretty good season. And last season, obviously, the Canucks beat the Edmonton Oilers, and the wheels completely fell off right after that. So hard to get too high or too low from this one game. We're going to talk about the Canucks power play, which didn't really have that great of a start in just a moment. But first, I want to talk to everyone about BetOnline.ag. As always, BetOnline is your number one spot for all the pro and college football action this season. With the new updated site interface, even more odds, props, and contests, BetOnline continues to be the number one source for everything football. Head to the website or use a mobile device to sign up today to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Don't forget to use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, so the Canucks power play didn't really have that great of a game.
No.
To me, it looked really static. That was really my issue with it. It looked really static. A lot of passing around the point, no real fluid movement. We talked about Alex Chason on the power play a bit earlier, a few minutes ago. I'm done with Alex Chason on the power play. I'm done with it. I don't want to see him again. And maybe it's just one game and maybe he turns it around. But after last night, I just don't see Alex Chason working on the power play in the long term. And you know what? When Brock Besser comes back, you're going to have another option on the power play. And maybe Chason gets bumped down to the second power play unit. And maybe he does a better job there. But I don't want to see him on the first power play unit with all the options the Vancouver Canucks theoretically have to populate that first power play unit.
Yeah, I think this is very much a case of where I think, and we saw this a little bit in practice, which in the morning skate, which I believe happened after you and I recorded yesterday. Some of the power play decisions the coaching staff was making were a little bit questionable. Like Justin Dowling on power play 2. I like him as a penalty killer. I like him as a fourth line guy. Power play 2? I don't think so. Not with the resources you already have at your disposal. At one point, Niels Höglander was not even on taking power play reps in practice, which was a huge question mark considering the fact that he's such a talented scorer and you know what he can do with the puck. And you mentioned the static passing thing. That's been a trademark of this team for a while. They did I believe relieve Doug who was it running? I believe it was Doug Jarvis running their power play last season. And they've since changed over to a new power play coach. But the Canucks for a long time have been this team that really overpasses. They're very much a team on the power play that tries, I personally, I think a little too hard to try and find the perfect shot rather than trying to keep things moving and trying to just get shots on net, put traffic in front, close in on the defense and make them move for it. They're a team that likes to rely on the long bomb. It did end up working at one point with the Oliver Ekman-Larsson goal. They got the traffic in front. The long shot from the blue line goes in under Mike Smith, but they do that too often. It to the point where I know points I've seen with the Canucks where teams start telegraphing exactly what they're about to do because they know they're just going to pass it around until they think they have the perfect shot at it. And passing is good. It keeps the goalie moving. You want to try and open him up for a shot. But at some point, you have to take a few more. And sometimes you just got to go for the greasy goal. You got to go for the one that's just, you throw it in low. You look for the deflection. If that doesn't happen, you go for you just hack at the rebound and see if you can get there. And right now, they're not doing that. They're just going for the nice shot, long shot in and hoping something tips on the way through.
And you mentioned, playing for the perfect pass and the perfect play, kind of like what the Edmonton Oilers, they want to score goals like the Edmonton Oilers do on their.
They want to do what the Oilers do without McDavid and Draisaitl.
Yeah, that's kind of the issue. And I've noticed it last season with Elias Pettersson. I noticed it last night. He does this thing where he'll fake the slap shot and then wait a bit and then wait to try and get the perfect shot. But by the time he does that, the defender is already in the shooting lane. So he can't really do anything. I think there's another thing especially for Elias Pettersson, just take the clap bombs, just take the one-timers, just take them right away. You fake the one-timer and then try and cut back in. The defender is already in the shooting lane, so then you have to pass it back to the point. I noticed that a couple of times last night on the power play.
Yeah, I don't know whether that's coaching or just his own personal.
I don't know what it is. It might be him overthinking it at this point.
I think it could be a case of I think he definitely I would say Pettersson is a guy whose first tendency is to facilitate rather than shoot. Not because which is, kind of crazy because he's an incredible scorer and has a tremendous shot. But I think you go back to normal time when the team's healthy. Normally he's got Brock Besser sitting on the other side of him. So I think his first thought is always, well, Brock has the better shot. So I'm gonna work it over to him so he can get the Ovechkin Stamkos one-timer from the half circle kind of thing. And Pettersson is a guy who maybe has to work out of that a little bit. He's a guy who should have a little bit, either whether that's the coaching staff telling him to look for the pass first, or that's himself telling himself to do so. You want to see him take the shot first because he's got the chops to put that puck in immediately. He's got the weight behind it. And I think he could find himself being a pretty prolific power play scorer if he did.
Yeah, and I think for going forward, I would like to see someone like we've talked about Alex Chason. I don't think he's long for the first power play. You know what I like to see net front on the power play? JT Miller. JT Miller at the net front, I think would be a good fit because you saw it last night. We mentioned it a few minutes ago. There was a few moments where he bobbled the puck at the blue line, made a poor pass that went out of the zone on the power play. I think net front, you avoid all those situations with JT Miller, puck management, and just put him in front of the net and say, hey, here, try and tip these pucks from bombs from the point or from shots from Pettersson and Besser. And you obviously have the risk of taking a shot wrong, but I think that is maybe something JT Miller could excel at on the power play, just being the net front. And he's kind of a bit of a pest. Like he's got a little snarl in him that you need to hunt for these rebounds in front.
Yeah, another guy I would throw in there. It's a little early for him, but why not try maybe on power play too? Vasily Podkolzin. Throw him in front of the net. He's a bigger guy. He's definitely a guy that likes to get into the corners and work the puck and work with the puck. I think he could, and he's clearly got the skills of a playmaker and a scorer. Like he's got the hands. I think he could be, if you're going to go for the long bomb as much as the Canucks like to do, the shot from the blue line from the defenseman, be it Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Quinn Hughes, whoever. He's a good fit there. And yeah, him and Miller are both the kinds of players that I feel could really thrive in that role. Hoglander might be an interesting option, although maybe you want him a little bit more along the outside because of
I think
what
that's
kind
where
of a
his
shot he has.
skill set fits better, is kind of on the walls.
Probably, but like if you needed it in a pinch, he'd be a good choice. He likes to get into the
What about
likes to
Tyler
get into the
Myers
dirty years.
on the net front? Just a big
Yes.
6'7" guy.
If anyone has listened to the Crease Cast in the past or last season, you'll know that I went on this long run of suggesting that Tyler Myers should be a fourth line wing, and that he's more suited for that. And was specifically what I said at the time was Tyler Myers is a guy who is a guy who wanted to be a forward but was told to be a defenseman by a coach in minor hockey because he was tall. Like he oozes that kind of personality on the ice of somebody who wanted to be a forward but was told from a very young age, no, you're tall, you're a defenseman. So yeah, maybe go for Tyler Myers there. If you're gonna try nutty things, might as well go the full 9 yards, right?
I think the Boston Bruins did that for a bit with Zdeno Chara. They put him on the net front on the power play. So it's not unprecedented that you just get a tall guy and be like park in front of the net and see if you can screen the goalie that way. Later in the game, we saw a switch up on the power play. OEL power play 1, Hughes and Hoglander on the second power play. I don't know if that's going to last, but what are your thoughts on potentially that arrangement going forward?
I mean, I think that was mostly just them trying to get something going because it really wasn't working for a while. It took them forever to get that power play running. I will say that I think Hughes is much better suited on your first power play than if you're having to choose between one defenseman. I also think Hoglander deserves more opportunities with the top power play unit. I think he meshes well with Pettersson. And with Pettersson and Hughes and that group specifically, I think he's a very good fit there. But if you're trying to spread the wealth, which the Canucks in theory can do with their power play units if they're able to get them working again, you could be in a scenario where you have 2 first power play units. Like, it's not out of the realm of possibility for this group. That should be the goal. You should not want one unit out there for a full minute and a half and the second unit out there to kill like 30 seconds of time and just not let the puck go in their own end. They have the tools now more than ever before to actually facilitate 2 full power play units. And it's going to behoove them to do that, to work on finding that puzzle, fitting that puzzle together as the season goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just about to talk about Francesco Aquilini's interview on Sportsnet 650, kind of his annual State of the Union address he gives before the start of every season. But before we do that, a word from our sponsor, Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing number of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. You can save time and money while using Rock Auto. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything you could ever need for your car: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, even new carpet. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, locked on in there. How did you hear about us box so they know we sent you? Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Okay, so Francesco Aquilini, the owner of the Vancouver Canucks, Frank the Tank, as the players used to call him, according to Kevin Bieksa, good old school reference there, had his annual, as I said earlier, State of the Union address on Sportsnet 650 yesterday. I'm not gonna read out a transcript of the entire interview here. I'll give everyone the cliff notes so we could talk about it. Pretty much, he backs Jim Benning. He made a point to say that he supports Jim Benning and the vision that he has for this hockey team, and he's behind him pretty much 100%. He emphasized a bunch of times how pretty much everything that could go wrong last season did go wrong, and I mean, I think he has a point there. Pretty much everything that could go wrong last year did go wrong. with the Vancouver Canucks pretty much
that.
pretty much from the jump. Shout out to Dan Riccio for asking about the Jake Virtanen investigation. That's probably a situation where his representatives or his PR team or the PR team from the Vancouver Canucks in general says, hey, don't ask about the Jake Virtanen situation. It sounded by the sounds of it, by how he reacted to it, he was not expecting that question. So shout out to Dan Riccio for asking about it. Overall, Lachlan, what are your thoughts on his thoughts on the Vancouver Canucks, Francesco Aquilini, that is?
Well, I'll say this. I always think that personally it's very hard. It's always very it doesn't matter who the owner is, it doesn't matter what team it's for, what league, whatever. You always want to take what they say, like what they say on these things with a little bit of just a little bit of a grain of salt, because their job is to make the team their job is also more or less to be PR kind of thing,
of
right?
Course.
More or less. They're not gonna, whether or not they actually agree with the things that they say on these things, that's not their job. Their job is to back the people that they've hired. Their job is to put themselves in front of that. And Francesco Aquilini did that with Jim Benning, which is what he should be doing. That is his job. That is his job, especially considering there is no president of hockey ops to potentially do that instead. So yeah, for him to come out and say, it's on me, this is my doing, that's what you want to hear that from him, in terms of especially when it comes to the people he's put in the front office, because there were a lot of things that happened last year that didn't go, like you mentioned, didn't go well for the Canucks. And I think a lot of the frustration around what happened last year was partially due to the fact that we didn't hear from Francesco Aquilini at all last year. I don't remember, you'd get the occasional tweet from him. His Twitter is,
well, he had the
Twitter
whole Twitter
fun.
thread in February about how he bashed Jim Benning, because there was a lot of rumors after the poor start that they were going to axe Benning.
Right, but also in that case, unlike in this case, right, there's someone there to ask questions. There's someone in the room to basically, and like you mentioned, Dan Riccio was very smartly asked him about the Jake Virtanen thing, because that is something you should be asking him, considering this is not
absolutely
new. This is still very fresh. And that's the kind of accountability that you can't be held to in just a Twitter thread, right? So it's good that he's making himself publicly available again, because right now, especially the way that the Canucks are formatted as an organization, like the fact that they don't have a president of hockey operations, who's, again, normally that's their job. Their job is to be the one going out and doing those things and being out in front of the camera, promoting the team and promoting the vision of the front office. Right now, that responsibility is going to fall on him, and that means he's got to be able to make himself more open and available for these types of interviews in the future, not just with the rights holder, with other with local papers, local websites, whatever. So it's good that he's at least accepting that for the moment, and he's coming out and he's making himself available for these interviews.
Yeah, I also had to laugh at them asking about the Fire Benning airplane banner that got flown around, and his was pretty much calling them lowlifes, and that's paraphrasing, of course. That was pretty funny. You could tell that banner got a lot of people rattled in that organization.
Well, I did see somebody. I forget who exactly it was. Oh, it might have been Wyatt Art at the stanchion in his new armies, talking about how he wants to hear what what Aquilini thought of the Fire Gillis stuff that happened back in 2014, because obviously we never heard anything about that, and that ended very quickly after that. That situation ended pretty quickly after that. So, I mean, again, another case of you should expect him to say that. You should expect him to say that, because of the fact that that's his general manager, and you can't, under no circumstances as an owner can you be publicly throwing him under the bus, whether or not you agree with his decisions or not. You can't. You just can't. It's your job is to make sure that you are giving him the vote of confidence in the public sphere. That's your job. And yeah, I didn't expect any other answer from him. I did not expect him to be like, oh, that was the funniest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah,
like,
no, he was not going to say anything like that. But
no, in the same way that no player is ever going to be like, oh, I want out of here in like end of season things. If there's been rumors of them demanding a trade, it's the same thing of like, no, they're not going to do that. That's a terrible idea. So you got to expect him to back his guy, and he did just that.
Yeah, I didn't expect anything else from Francesco Aquilini in that interview, but we don't hear from the guy that often, so it's pretty news. I would say it's fairly newsworthy when he does do a media appearance. But that has it for today's episode. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the last time we heard from him in a public interview, if I'm not mistaken, was I believe either before the World Juniors came to Vancouver in 2019. Or that might have been Trevor Linden too. That might have been Trevor Linden at the time, because it was like a 2018 announcement. So might not have been so the most recent one would have been the draft. I think the draft announcement in 20.
Probably.
So prior to the 2019 draft. So I guess also I think close to late 2018. It's 2021 now. I think that's it, which means it's been 4 years. It's been a while.
Yeah, and I also had to laugh at the tweet saying that he was going on the radio. It was at Sports 650. Sportsnet 650.
Sports 650. So close. Close.
You a big fan of sports? Yeah, just tune in the 650. It's just sports.
There are 600 and we do sports 650 days a year. That's our motto. That's our mantra. That's Locked On, and Locked On Canucks, same thing. 650 hours a day, 650 days a week. That's
yeah. We're gonna do that. The goal is 650 episodes by the end of the calendar year. It's gonna take a lot of work, but I think we can, if we crank out 10 a day. I think we can get to it at some point. But you know what?
The hockey guy on YouTube. He does a lot of videos, that guy.
He cranks them out, my lord. But you know what? That has it for today's episode of Locked On Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you once again for making Locked On Canucks your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We post full video episodes on there every single day. And make sure the second listen of your day is Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Host Scott Collin leans on his decades of fantasy hockey insight and experience every day to help you be the expert of your fantasy league. It's free and available on all platforms. See you tomorrow.